Welcome to Synthesize This. In this episode, we're going to be synthesizing a bass sound on the Dave Smith Instruments Pro 2. Let's get started. So as usual, the first thing we want to do is initialize a basic patch by going to global, scrolling down to 34 and hitting right now. So in this video, we're going to be focusing on somewhat of a generic synth bass patch. There are multiple ways to synthesize all kinds of different bass sounds. So we're going to focus on just building the right foundation from which you could build your own sounds. The key thing we're going to aim for here is to have a bass sound that covers multiple octaves. And in the higher octaves, we're going to have a sound that is more harmonically rich and has more character to give it a tonal edge. In the lower octaves, we're going to have a sound with lower harmonics, such as sine waves and triangle waves, just to give it that lower end oomph. And then we're going to play with various parameters to add expressivity to our sound. So in oscillator 1, I'm going to keep the sawtooth wave that is there right now. And I'm going to bring up oscillator 2. I'm going to turn it into a sine wave and set it to be an octave lower. I'm going to bring that up. And that gives it that punchy low end. I'm also going to bring up oscillator 3. I'm going to turn that into a triangle wave and also bring it down an octave lower. The next important thing for the synth bass sound we're going for here is set the right shape and a VCA envelope. So we're going to set a quick attack, low decay, high sustain, and low release. And that gives us that typical synth bass sound where there's no release, you get a really quick attack, a nice clean shape here. We're also going to bring the transpose down one octave because naturally we're trying to play bass sounds here. I'm going to go into the miscellaneous parameters and set my key assign to last note. Another thing I like to do for these kinds of sounds is to set a specific octave range for my pitch wheel. By default, it starts at 7 semitones. I prefer to have it at 2 semitones. I'm going to detune the two low oscillators slightly. I'm going to use the fine tune to shift my sine wave and triangle wave. It gives it a little bit of a fatter sound. And I'm going to use oscillator 4. So here we can experiment with different things. We can either add some noise. So let's see what that sounds like. Select white noise. Key is to have it subtle. Just adds a little bit of... Another thing I like to do, which is more to do with performance again, is to add a bit of glide. So I'm going to set the glide level on all 4 oscillators at the same time. So make it a little more subtle. The next thing we're going to do is add some vibrato controlled by aftertouch. So vibrato is just a change in pitch. So we're going to use the LFO and set the destination to control all 4 oscillator frequencies. And I'm going to go to the mod matrix and pick LFO 1 amount to be controlled by aftertouch and bring up the amount. So I'm actually going to go and replace my sine wave with a pulse wave, and I'm going to add some pulse width modulation to that low end. And I'm going to substitute what used to be the sine wave there with this oscillator 1 sub octave switch here, which basically gives you a free sine wave at a lower octave. And now I'm going to use LFO 2 to pulse width modulate oscillator 2 here. So I'm going to pick oscillator 2 shape mod and bring up the amount and lower the frequency all the way down. And that gives you that kind of... The other thing we can replace the white noise with is another thin sounding oscillator. So let's pick a triangle wave, and this time we can bring it up an octave higher actually. Adds a little more character on the high end. Obviously we don't want to turn it into a lead sound, so the key is to make it subtle again. I'm just kind of adding a little more harmonics at the higher end to give it a little more definition. Let's move on to the filter section. Let's start with some low pass sweeps. Filter 1 here sounds lovely on the Pro 2. So let's have that be modulated by the filter 1 envelope here. I'm going to set sort of a plucky shape, attack and sustain all the way down, and then play with release and decay. bring up the resonance a little bit. Let's see what some of the character section stuff has to offer. There's a little bit of drive. There's a decimator. Some hack. We can play around with changing the main sawtooth oscillator into a pulse. I'm going to lower the amount of the pulse width modulation because it tends to cut the sound in and out. Let's see what a bit of distortion sounds like. It removes a bit of the bottom end, but it adds some nice character. Let's try to add some high-pass filter. This is slightly unintuitive for bass to remove the low frequencies. But when you combine the low-pass filter and the high-pass filter, you get sort of a formant effect where you can potentially get vocal-ish sounds if you find the right sweet spots and higher the resonances. So let's try to find that sweet spot. So you hear a bit of that yeah kind of vowel sound. An interesting other trick is if you combine the two filters and have them both low pass, you can have independent filter shapes. So filter 1 here, I'll have it set up with a high sustain, so it's going to keep ringing as I hold the note. But filter 2, I have it low sustain, so it's more of a plucky sound. You hear that meow meow at the beginning. Let's try to engage the sequencer.